My name is Janet Ashcroft Summit, and I'm the owner of Peace Through Principles. In this podcast today, we will be talking with Dr. Carla Hannaford. Carla is an author, biologist, and educator. She has written 4 books, which have been translated into many languages. She has traveled all over the world, in fact, to 51 countries, and has been quoted in more than 1,000 journals and books. She teaches the importance of movement and being conscious in our physical body to improve learning and wellness. I am very impressed with Carla's credentials. However, my introduction is going to consist of a more personal note. I picked up the book Smart Moves about 18 years ago. At the time, I was searching for a way to help 2 of my children who were struggling with reading, attention, and learning issues. I began to implement the things I learned from the book written by Dr. Hannaford. I have 10 children, and I taught them all the movement patterns I read about. I have vivid memories of my children crawling around the circular pathway in our home each morning before they would begin to sit down and do schoolwork. Usually, we'd end up laughing out loud and were exhausted, but they were ready to learn. The amazing thing was that it helped them learn, and reading scores improved dramatically. It helped all of my children. We've used the techniques that I learned from the book every single day in our home since, and I've used it in many different classes where I've taught other children too. A year ago, I decided to see if I could find Carla through her publisher and asked her to speak to a group of my friends. It really helped them too. So this year, I asked her to do that again. I did not know until preparing this introduction how very widely respected Carla has been in her field, nor how many people she has helped. I just knew she had helped my family. To me, that says it all. Dr. Hannaford really wants to help people. That is what impresses me most about her. I am grateful for her work and for her ability to teach and help many, many people. So now we'll listen to Carla simply teach us about the importance of movement.
Well, first of all, I didn't read until I was 10. And that wasn't a big problem back in the 1950s. So um, all of a sudden, I was able to kind of figure out how to do it. But before that, my daughter had troubles with reading. And so I was concerned about that. But I was teaching at the university and I was using a beat a second music in the background with Georgie Lazarno's work, Super Learning, that helped with alpha brainwave activities so that my students in the biology classes at the university could learn easily the Latin and, what went with biology. But I was invited to do this with the intermediate school in Kona there, and they're always looking for someone to take care of those hormonal kids, not exactly fun. And I thought, well, this is great. I will do this because my daughter was just going into the intermediate school. And she, of course, was mortified I would do this. But right before I went into this school to work with the super learning, I took a Touch for Health class from a nurse practitioner. Back in the 1970s, I was teaching anatomy and physiology to nurses that were attempting to get a baccalaureate degree. And so they needed the anatomy and physiology. And at that time, in Denver, they were giving scholarships for people to take Touch for Health and use it in the nursing profession throughout Denver. And so my students would come in and say, oh, stick out your arm or stick out your leg. And then they'd do something and it would change. And I thought, this is fascinating. So I took the Touch for Health class, and the nurse practitioner said, if you're going to work with these kids, you need to know brain gym. And she showed me 4 movements. That was all. And one was cross crawl, where I'm just simply touching my elbow to the opposite knee, and then the other. So it's actually walking, like when we're walking. So we're crossing the midline of the body. And in so doing, we're activating both hemispheres of the brain. So a simple thing like walking, but it's profound in how it causes the brain to come back to an integrated state. And the other one was unrolling your earlobes from top to bottom. And this helps memory. And so you go from top down to bottom. And interestingly enough, right now there are 60 journals coming in monthly to the National Medical Library in Washington, D.C., just on research on traditional Chinese medicine. And what they've discovered is that all of these points in the ear actually activate the whole body for listening. But up here are the feet, and then down here is the head. And they've isolated over 1,000 points. If you go to an acupuncturist, they have 144 points that they will activate. And it's interesting, in the Olympics, they use this a lot because it actually activates the whole body and it helps with memory. So my students at the university later on, they use this all the time because it helped them remember, for tests. And my daughter also used it when she did acting to get her, remember her lines. So that, we call it thinking caps. And then the other was the lazy 8, which was doing the infinity symbol. These are all in the book in Smart Moves, so you can see all these, but the infinity symbol where you go up in the middle and around, up in the middle and around. And it's used for writing as well as for eyes. Now, some of you I know are working with younger children. You want to make sure that they're doing it in sand or bird seed or rice, somewhere where they're getting a sense on their body. They need that more. Or your back. If you're a parent, this feels great. Your child do the 8s on the back. So one hand, the other hand, and both. And then the final one was the hookups. And that's where you cross one ankle over the other. So you could do that right now where you are, whichever feels most comfortable. And you can do it sitting down, but if you stand up and do it, you're activating the vestibular system, which is key to all learning. And it's where our kids today are really suffering because they haven't developed their vestibular systems well. And I'll come back to that because I think it's so important. And then if you put your hands out, thumbs down, backs together, like this, lift one hand over the other and interlock those fingers, and then roll them under so they're lying on your chest, and get your shoulders away from your earlobes. Put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and just breathe. This is powerful. You're activating huge areas of the brain for the hand. There's both motor and sensory areas for the hand here. And you're activating big areas for the feet by crossing the ankles. And the tongue is connecting what we now know as the governing and central meridians. So
oh, that's cool. I've never thought about that, your tongue connecting those.
Yeah.
Oh, that because I've done that many times. I just didn't realize that. Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. So so those 4 movements, that's all she gave me. And so I went in and I was working with a group called the CSAP, which is Comprehensive Student Alienation Program. So these were 19 junior high, intermediate kids. And they would come in, I had a beat a second music going on in the background, and then I'd have them do these 4 activities. And then I would tutor whatever they were interested in, I would work with them. Well, about a week and a half after starting this program, I get the English teacher coming to me and saying, "What are you doing with Jessie?" And I says, "Well, a little cross crawl, some hookups, why?" And she said, "He offered to read." And I said, "Yeah?" And she says, "You don't know about Jessie?" And I said, "No." They had handed me the files of all these kids, but I'm teaching full-time at the university and doing this project half-time at the intermediate school as a single parent. I didn't read the files, thank goodness. So I had no preconceived notions about these kids. And I remember when Jesse came in, I thought, gosh, he seems a little older. He was tall and, kind of older. And I didn't ask. And I said, what do you want to do? And he said, oh, I guess reading. And I said, what are you interested in? He said, motorcycles. So we went to the library and got magazines on motorcycles, did these activities, and worked with him on reading. And he seemed to be moving forward. I only had met him twice and done tutoring with him. Apparently, according to all these teachers, he had never read. And here he was offering to read in class. And then I got all these other teachers coming and saying, well, what are you doing with Leilani? And what are you doing with Miley? And what are you doing with Heather? And I said, well, a little of this and some cross. Well, I was fascinated. And this is great for a scientist to not know ahead of time. So even the principal came to me and said, would you do a little thing with all the teachers, show them what you're doing? Well, you do a little of this. I went to all of, here I am in biology and neurology. My PhD is in neurology. And there wasn't anything that really could tell me, except that I knew the motor cortex, the sensory cortex were here. They were big, and the area for the hand was huge. And doing manipulatives, in students, whenever they were working with their hands, it was going to activate both hemispheres. And then the vestibular system. And so putting those pieces together, and then I had these wonderful laboratories, because this 9-week pilot project at the intermediate school ended up being 4 years long. And the next year, the principal for the elementary school, Dr. Okada, asked me to work with the special ed. And I was like, yeah, another laboratory. So I'm half-time at the intermediate, half-time at the grade school, full-time at the university as a single parent. I was younger. That allowed me to do this. But I watched what happened. And boy, the elementary school kids, my gosh, the difference these movements made in their life and their ability to start reading at grade level and writing and being more creative. It was fascinating to me. And so that's when I started putting together Smart Moves, the book, the first edition. And
that's what I have.
you have the first, you don't have the second edition?
I don't. I'm just looking. I think it might be a first edition. It's copyright 1995.
Yep. So I updated it. So it's 80% updated. So Janet, you need to send me your address. I'll send you an updated version.
Oh, I'll buy one, but it's a wonderful book.
Yeah, well, the new one has so much more in it, because I learned so much, and putting together a lot of the research. Right now, there's a lot of research around the importance of movement for learning. In fact, it's key. It's the only thing that allows us to really move and learn. We have to move in order to learn. If we didn't move, we wouldn't need a brain. The brain is all wired for movement. We have the largest area of the brain. I mean, the one with the most connections, at least 30,000 connections per nerve cell, is the cerebellum, which is in the back of the brain. And we've always known it had to do with movement. But we didn't know is that it also modulates all the rest of the functions of the brain. So what we've been focusing on is this neocortex, which is actually the last to get it and not very important. We saw this, saw a documentary on a young woman, Brandy Binder, who, when she was 4, started having seizures. And she'd have upward of 300 seizures a day. And finally, they decided what they needed to do was take out the epicenter where the seizures were. It was right here in the neocortex. And they told her parents, if we do that, she's going to be paralyzed on the left side of her brain because that's the right side controls the left side of the body. And they said, well, she was dying because of all these seizures. It was a kind of meningitis she had. So they went in and they took out the epicenter. 6 hours later, she seizured. And so they took out the whole right hemisphere of the brain, the whole right hemisphere, gone. Nothing there, only the left hemisphere. She still has no right hemisphere. But she had the cerebellum and she had what we call the limbic system, where memory is, the hippocampus, the thalamus that has to do with our sensory input, and the amygdala that has to do with our emotional connections, our how we put things to really put things together emotionally. So within a week, she recognized her parents, she was singing, and what we know now, Michael Mersnick at the University of California knows that we are very plastic. Our brains are very plastic. And that what was happening with Brandy is that her left hemisphere was taking over the functions that were gone from her right hemisphere. So in this documentary, the 60-minute documentary, she was 14. And she was talking about how in her classroom, here at the front of the classroom, they had a big banner that said, if Brandy can do it with half a brain, you can do it with the whole brain. And she had a good sense of humor. And she was talking about how she really liked boys. And I was giving an in-service for the teachers in Michigan, in Detroit. And right in the front row, this woman said, boy, she likes boys. And I said, you know her? And she says, yeah, I'm her physical therapist. And what had happened is the doctors had said she would always be in a wheelchair. She'd never be normal. Her parents said, no way. Her mom built a box for her that she could stand in and get a sense of gravity on her feet and start to really work that vestibular system in the cerebellum. And she had 2 siblings that rough and tumble played with her and rolled her around, tickled her, and played with her. And then they got with physical and occupational therapists, moving her, getting her moving. And here she was now, you know, when I met her, this is it, Lucy French, who was her PT, working with her with Brain Gym in Michigan, she said, would you like to meet her? And she had just graduated from high school. And I said, yeah. The next day, she and her mother came in. And here was this beautiful young woman. They had to put a lift in her left shoe because it was shorter, her foot, her leg. And her left eye didn't work. And the hand, very complex. It takes 20 years to fully develop the hand. So her hand was all like this, and they just cut the ligaments because she could move her arm, and nobody ever noticed. And here was this beautiful young woman, very, just brilliant. And right now 3 years ago, she graduated from the university, and she goes around the world teaching. And so the neocortex isn't so important, but the cerebellum is, and the vestibular system. The more we move, the more we learn. It's really important. And to have children sit still and be quiet doesn't work. Here's an interesting thing. The vestibular system has to do with balance. So it's really important when you have a child, a baby, not to be lifting them up on their feet. Let them kind of guide you as to when they're ready to walk. They shouldn't be walking before the age of 1. That crawling, that cross-lateral movement is essential for developing the vestibular system. They need to crawl, and pretty soon they pull themselves up on things. Let them do it. Don't pull them up. And the other thing is, don't let them dangle when they're babies. Those new carriers where the baby is out like a shield on the parent, it's horrible. OTs are just like, ah, because they don't have anything that they can push against. If they're face in a carrier, either on the front or the back, they can push with their legs against the body of the parent, and it helps to develop the pelvic structure so that when they do stand up, they have strength there. And so you don't want them to dangle. And, getting them to then pull up on their own. Then letting them have a chance to climb. Babies and young children are mostly cartilage, and they bounce. They don't really break stuff easily. So they need to know what their limits are, and they need to find out from using their bodies. I've been in the forced kindergartens in Germany and actually all of Scandinavia. And the children, they go to these forced kindergarten at the age of 2.5, about 2.5. And they go into the forest. They spend 5 hours a day in the forest, no matter what the weather, if it's snowing or whatever, they're in the forest. But these kiddos don't take the paths. They want to climb the rocks. And so here they are climbing the rocks, and they're slipping and they're not quite making it. My impulse is to help them. And the adult said, don't do it. They're developing their vestibular system. They're fine. So they don't help the children unless the children ask. And if the children ask, they say, how shall I help you? So the children have to do some deductive reasoning, like, well, put your hand under my foot. I love it. And if they fall, the adult looks at them and says, figures out if they're really hurt or not. Most of the time they're just, they've just fallen. And then the adult, instead of running to them like we tend to do in the United States, as helicopter parents, the adults lean down, open their arms, the children run into them, and the adults hug them up really good, and pretty soon the kids are going, okay, and they're off playing. But they have to find their body. They have to feel their body. They have to know that. And that's developing the vestibular, the balance system, and it's developing the cerebellum, the movement system. So that when they go to school, the eyes will start tracking together so they can read more easily. They're developing their whole learning system. The other thing is they need to communicate, and they will mirror us. So the most important thing we can do if we want our children to language well, and then later on read, because we know dyslexia is first of all a hearing problem. They
I didn't know
can't
that.
hear, sound discrimination. So they're not hearing the words in order to mirror them, mimic them, to say them. And you don't get that if they're listening to a digitized sound, like a television or a computer. The digitized sound cuts out most of the harmonics and overtones that allow us to really understand language. What they have to hear is our voice, and they need to mirror that voice. So they need to be speaking. And whenever they're talking or laughing or screaming or, playing, they're activating this joint. So everybody that's here, feel that. It's the temporal mandibular joint right here where the lower jaw comes into the upper jaw. Now across that joint come more nerve endings than any other place in the body. And they go to the eyes to help the eyes to move and work together. They go to the ears for hearing. They go to all these muscles of the face so that we can use our mouths to actually language well. Okay? So this TMJ. So we see today so many children and adults that grind their teeth, that have tight jaws. This all tightens up, and that's a stress reaction. And it makes it impossible for the nerves to function properly to get the eyes moving and the hearing and the facial expressions. So here's another brain gym that's so wonderful when it's the energy on, where you massage that. Oh, and then yawn. So everybody do this. This is really important. Make sound. Oh, oh. So it helps us with reading. It helps us with hearing. And it helps all of these facial muscles. It goes to the tongue to move. But
It's also very relaxing.
It's very relaxing. And you're getting oxygen to the brain. It's great. In fact, it's more relaxing if you go to the book, How God Changes Your Brain by Mark Waldman. He's one of our great neurologists. He has a whole chapter just on yawning because it's helping us. It helps all of our muscles so that when we're doing athletics, we do better. I mean, it's incredible, this. But here's another one. Everybody just feel under here and go. Feel that? Those are ligaments that I feel here. They're ligaments that hook to the tongue, and they let us vocalize, but they also go to the vestibular system to activate the vestibular system. So when children are talking, when we're talking, we're activating that balance center. We need to do that. It's really important. Singing, I love this. In Denmark, which is the top education system in the world, when they see somebody, a student that exhibits some of the dyslexia characteristics, they do two things. One is they get them to occupational or physical therapists to move. The other is to get them in a choir where they're singing and they're using all of this mechanism. And the singing really helps. So moving with our children, we need to play with them. We need to rough and tumble play with them. That's really important. Touch, oh, let me talk about touch for a minute. Every time we touch someone, and especially on the back, you know, that's real safe touch, but along there, it increases nerve growth factor. We are growing nerves in our brain until the day we die. And they're hooking into the hippocampus for memory. They're also in the olfactory lobes for smell, and then down the spine. And these new nerves, the way we grow them is through movement. And that's all talked about in Smart Moves. We discovered that the more we move, the more we grow these nerves till the day we die. We can grow as many as 60,000 new nerves a day if we're not stressed and we're moving. So those are the two things. You get rid of stress and you keep moving. But when we touch someone, it increases nerve growth factor, which stabilizes those nerves and helps them to grow. So touch is key. It's so important. In fact, it's so important that children will be bad to be spanked, because then at least they know they're real. We need to touch. You know, we need to, and our children need to learn to do that with us, that empathy piece, where, you know, if we're not feeling good, our children know it. They're very aware. And so they'll come and they'll say, Mommy, are you feeling bad? And oftentimes, because we're the mom, we go, I'm fine, and then they go, oh, I can't trust my knowing. And that's not good. So if you say, yeah, I'm not feeling so good, they'll go, oh, and then they can rub our backs, and they're learning empathy, and that's so important, especially now. Right now, I mean, I've got article after article after article looking at cell phone addiction. And one of the big things that it takes away is our empathy. And we're seeing it right now with teenagers big time. And they're not communicating face to face. They don't know how to do it. They're missing those very important the cues that we give with our body, with our facial expressions. So I could spend a long time talking about our technology. I love our technology. It's not appropriate for children under the age of 11. We know that. It's the time when the global brain is developing, and they need to be outside playing. They need to be in nature. They need to be interacting with each other. They need to be playing. And having a cell phone is the worst thing that can happen. It's got a flicker. It's got blue light that makes it harder for them to sleep. It just one thing after another, and it decreases their ability to develop empathy.
Carla?
So even Steve Jobs would not let his kids have computers or anything before the age of 14.
Carla, I was going to ask, is it strictly cell phones that decreases empathy, or would it be all screens?
No, it's computers also.
Okay.
Yeah, the computers have a flicker. You know that, the flicker that's in a television. If you take a video of the computer screen, you get the same flicker. That flicker sets up a message in the brain, danger, danger, something's coming out of the forest at me. And so they have to watch it. And their adrenaline and cortisol levels go way high, and they go into stress. And the minute you go into stress, you shut down the ability of the brain to think and learn and create. In fact, it shuts down most of the brain, 75 to 85% of the brain, so you just react. So if you'll notice, when you turn the television off from the kids, are they nice and calm and they go and play and be creative?
Mm-hmm.
They've got so much adrenaline and cortisol, they're in stress, and they're reactive. So one of the greatest things you can do as parents is, and they're going to be resistant, but mirror to them playing. Get those board games out. Go and ruffle tumble play with them. Get them out in nature. It's good for you. It's good for them. And tell them why the cell phone isn't okay. The studies, I love this. If you've got kids in school and they're taking their cell phone, they found that if the cell phone is just in the room and turned off, they will do 30% worse on testing than if the cell phone was not anywhere in the building. Right now, China, I love it. China has been really watching the research, and now cell phones are totally banned in schools.
Oh, wow.
And they find that the students do far better. And 80% of the students in our best universities that are studying computers, that are coming up with new technologies with computers, and right now prosthetics, they're way ahead of us, are Chinese students. So it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
They're falling behind. And what we need is to have that global brain in place, like Steve Jobs did when he finally came to computers. He worked with his dad, who was a mechanic. And, give the kids the time. Really tell them, this isn't good for you. I'm the parent. This isn't good for you. What is good for you is this. And be present with them. And I know that's going against everything that parents are seeing today. They think that if their child is on a computer early, they're going to be smarter. We're finding that we're dumbing our kids down right and left with this technology. So, looking at that's important.
So if you have what you'd recommend those 4 exercises for sure for us to help our children. And then obviously reading your book will give us more ideas.
Yeah.
And then you'd recommend being in nature and active with our children as much as possible.
And it's good for us. It's so good for us. Right now we're seeing adults, so many couch potato adults. No energy, no creativity. And we need it. Because this makes us smarter.
Well, I know that my 2 boys that I had worried about this, which is why I found your book in the first place, we implemented the cross crawl, and we had a home that had a circular pathway, living room, kitchen, etc. And I made all my children, I have 10 of them, I made them crawl around that whole pathway twice each morning. And it made a huge difference. Well, I believe for all my kids, but those 2 in particular, that was absolutely pivotal. And within about, I'd say 5 months, they were both reading at grade level. And yet they were teenagers and not reading, basic books. So I have a real testimonial that movement works.
Yeah. We have testimonials from all over the world, Yeah.
Is there an ideal time of day to do that sort of thing? First thing in the morning, or just before you learn, or multiple times a day?
What I suggested, well, in schools, it's nice to start with it. And it takes about 3 minutes. So 3 minutes, and then they're off and running. And when they start to get antsy, get one of the kids to get up and lead a brain gym, and everybody does it. You point to that kid and say, which brain gym you want to do? And they'll do their favorites. And and the teacher does it too, because the teacher, they're mirroring us. But first thing, before they go to school in the morning and when they come home, and the thing is, what's good is to have them lead you. If you're like, okay, now you've got to do your brain gym, they're not going to want to do it, but it's like, okay, let's go around the circular area of our house, or let's just run outside and go around, the building a couple of times before they sit down to do homework or do anything, and be good for you as well as them. And when they feel stressed, this is magic. I mean, with regard to testing, this will help them remember if they get stuck on something, or in school they know this is important, I've got to remember this, and the hookups, oh my gosh, they start feeling stressed, you start feeling stressed, do this. If they're stressed and they're not going to do it, you do it. Just in front of them, put your tongue on the roof of your mouth and just get present. Start breathing. Focus on your breathing. And it will calm them down. We have all this research showing that when we get what's called coherent, like our brain becomes coherent, it actually starts at the heart. The heart becomes coherent, the brain becomes coherent. They will become coherent. And I do this all the time. I go to I'm in airports a lot. And here are kids that are really stressed out and they're crying and upset. And I will just go and stand, close to them. Not close that it would scare them, but close. And you start breathing and they stop crying. I love it, because my coherence, my heart coming down, getting rid of all of that stress will affect everyone around me. And if your teachers do it in front of the class, if the class is starting to get wild and out of control, you do this. But show them these are tools. These are tools that you can use. And that is in Smart Moves. The hookups are in Smart Moves.
So I know we're almost out of time, but and I appreciate your time, but I just had a thought. There's many of us who have children that are struggling with depression, with anxiety, with those types of things. These exercises would obviously help them, but is there something else we need to pursue to help them also?
Just Scientific American came out with a big article on depression because it's the #1 thing in the world today. And just taking a walk stops it. There's an area here in the prefrontal cortex on the right side where we go over and over, my life is horrible, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And we dig ourselves deeper into that depression. And what they found was just taking a walk. Taking a walk for 20 minutes stopped the depression. It stopped the adrenaline and cortisol. So it actually makes a hormonal difference in the body. And it increases the dopamine levels so that we can learn and so we can calm down. So taking a walk, and again, this, and, we're on a computer right now. One of the things they say is get away from your computer 2 hours before you go to sleep, because then you can go into deep sleep. Otherwise, that blue light keeps you from sleeping deeply. And depression is, really exacerbated by lack of sleep. And I don't know how many of you, have problems with sleep, but I know in my classes, I'll ask people and almost everybody's hand goes up now when they've been on all, their technology. So here's another, just a little helpful hint. If you do have problems with sleep and you're not sleeping, get up, get some whole wheat bread, I take just a half a piece, I break it in half, no butter, and just chew it slowly. And what it does is release tryptophan, just like turkey does. You know how turkey puts you to sleep after Thanksgiving meal? This will do the same thing. So, and then go back to sleep, and you might go into hookups, lie in hookups, and just focus on your breathing. So that helps, but just being aware of staying away from computers or television or cell phones about 2 hours before you go to sleep is good. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anyone that has a question? Nope.
I know that was kind of a lot.
Oh, Carla, that's really wonderful. We appreciate you very much. And if you could hear us all, we'd give you a round of applause. But
Oh,
we really are grateful for
so
that.
Amanda, you've got a little friend. Who's that friend? You have to hit the button. Hi, kiddo. Show your parents how to do. There you are.
This is Cammie.
Hi, Kelly. Show your parents how to do brain gym.
Yeah.
Oh, how smart you are.
I just had all my kids do the figure 8 crawling and did their hands flipped, and they're obeying me really well now.
All right, good. Yeah.
Well,
And it's fun. It's fun. It's movement. And so it's fun. And have them come up with new ways of cross crawling. They could do the monkey crawl, or they could the spider crawl. They'll come up with new ways of doing it, and it's perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you for all you do. We're grateful for you and that you would spend time with us.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
All right.
Just if you're interested, if you get my latest book is Playing in the Unified Field, Raising and Becoming Conscious Creative Human Beings.
Oh.
And so that's, if you just go online, Carla Hannaford. It'll show my books, and that might be an interesting one for you. Yeah.
Bye.
Thanks, Janet, for putting
Thank
this
you.
together. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.